Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl Ilove, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Welcome back to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And one of the things that we love to do on the show is to educate people and really empower them to understand that you've got choices, that you can make decisions and go against the crowd and maybe think outside the box. And I have a lady we're talking to today who is going to help us really expand on that idea. Her name is Denise Cope. She is the president of Affordable Degrees Abroad, and I like to call her a cross-cultural ninja. So Denise, welcome to the show.
Great, thanks Cheryl for having me.
It is a pleasure. So you have a really interesting and compelling story, and I love what you offer people, students and families, to learn that they can actually get a very high quality degree abroad at a very reasonable price. So tell us how you got into this.
I have been in higher education for over 20 years, and I have a real love of higher education and the transformation that can happen in an educational space. And I've also been an international educator my entire life as well. And so I myself have lived abroad for about 6 years and also was working in universities to help students with to find good educational opportunities abroad for US students. So that was really just for a semester. So I personally have sent over 4,000 students abroad to 52 countries. I've sort of seen this transformation firsthand with students, but I've also experienced it myself. And so I have a passion to make sure folks know that it's accessible to do degrees abroad. I left higher education. I was director of the Office of International Education at a prominent US university, and I left at the end of August of 2019. And in part, I left because I knew I had a solution to what I was seeing as the high escalating cost of US higher education. And I felt that I really wanted to share this with US students and US families, just to make sure that they knew that they had an option.
So let me ask you this, was this transition for yourself, going from higher education to going out on your own, was that an easy transformation for you?
Ooh, that is such a great question. No, it's one of those things where I've talked to a number of students and families who were frustrated with education and how much it cost for years. And I had this idea for years. And honestly, I had to hire a coach to help me make a transition to being an entrepreneur, because it felt scary, basically leaving the mother nest, right? The ship, the big ship, right, in order to step out on my own and to be both an advocate and an entrepreneur. And honestly, I don't know if I would have left or had the courage to leave and to start this new business had I not hired a coach to really work with my fears. Like something as simple as like healthcare. What are we doing with healthcare now, right? All of those like little fears add up into major roadblocks. So it was a year of coaching to get to a point where I was like, no, I'm ready. I'm launching. It's time.
That's great, because there really is an awful lot of fear when you're going out on your own, because it's almost like you're walking on this tightrope and you're looking down to this great abyss and you have no idea what's going to happen if you fall. And it is really frightening. And you talk about like even something as quote unquote simple as healthcare, and trying to find healthcare for yourself and your husband. That's not a simple thing. That's pretty complicated.
Yeah, I was shocked at how complicated it was. But yeah, it was just like compounded fears of like, can I do this? Do I have enough expertise? Even questioning myself, right? With 20 years experience, right? Can I do this? So I had to also, I think it was a mindset coaching as well as the logistics coaching.
Isn't that amazing how you can be so skilled or an expert in a field, 20 years experience, and yet we still have those self-doubts? Why do we do that to ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, I think, your podcast is called FemiNinja for a reason, because I think as women, we have a tendency to sort of doubt ourselves and doubt our expertise, that we want to be so over prepared that no one can possibly question us. When in fact, I think, a lot of us, we've got the experience, we've got the expertise, and it's stepping into that space bravely to say, yeah, I can do this. And being a ninja.
That is so beautifully put. That is beautiful. Thank you so much for saying that. And that's why I call you a cross-cultural ninja. And there was one thing when we were talking last week, you did mention that how important it is to listen to your inner voice. So if you can talk about that just a little bit so our listeners can get a little bit more inspiration from that, that'd be awesome.
Okay, I'm going to talk about it from two different perspectives. One will be my own perspective, but then I'm going to also talk about it from a student perspective.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, from my own perspective, I think my career has never been like a straight line. I've sort of been like on the jungle gym, and I've lived in a lot of different countries. I've always been in higher education in some capacity, but I've done a lot of intercultural work. And it's been, so I've had to like trust myself with each step. So I didn't have the big roadmap of like, here's, point A and here's point B, and I'm just going to, get there through this roadmap. I had to, along the way, stop and listen to myself and say, does this feel right now? And trusting myself enough to make that next step into whatever that career choice is. So that's sort of been my own career path, which I would, consider, it's not the big roadmap. It's listening deeply to the inner voice and the vocation that's calling from within.
And the one word that you used that really resonated with me, and I think would resonate with a lot of our listeners, is trust. Because a lot of us have issues with trust. I know I certainly do. And it's really hard to understand that if you listen to that inner voice, it's there for a reason. It's there to help you. And so many times we tell that voice to, oh, no, shush, no, don't talk anymore. But if you really kind of just quiet yourself down and listen to that in a visceral way, magic happens.
It's so true. It is so true. And I think about, like, right now I'm working with a young woman, and her story is really interesting too. So she graduated with a degree in international studies in Chinese. And right now she is in China. Oh, wow. And teaching English. And it's interesting. So for folks, in the future who are listening to this is COVID-19 time. And the United States is, I'd say, in a sort of a, scary space of it growing here in the US. And China, has gone through their scary time in January. And so anyhow, so she's gone through that, but now she really, really wants to expand her career. And so she's one of my clients. We talked about what her career goals were, and I made recommendations for her based on what she was telling me. And so it was programs from around the world. And these are all graduate programs that she's interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And the part that really struck me with her, and it's not just her, this is a number of students that I'm working with, it's like, maybe it's like this imposter syndrome. It's like, can I do this? Am I good enough to do this? And I hadn't realized that my coaching also involved, it wasn't just degree coaching to help students with figuring out the right program for themselves. It's actually like coaching around this building inner strength to trust yourself.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you went through when you flew the coop, so to speak, and left the US.
Right. Yeah, so that part's been interesting for me to step into the role of also like life coach, in addition to just a degree coach.
So when you're working with the students directly, do you work with the families as well? Because are they a little bit hesitant or, a little fearful about stepping out of the norm and doing something different and getting a degree from a different country rather than staying here in the United States?
Mm-hmm. Good question. For graduate students, so these are students who've already completed their undergrad degree and they're looking to do a graduate degree abroad. Honestly, I've not dealt with one parent in that situation.
Okay.
In all cases, the students are, they've been living on their own for a while. They're pretty self-reliant and resilient. So, but at the undergrad space, families are an absolute, like 100% partner in the process. And for undergrad, this is a really new concept. In the graduate space, this is still a relatively new concept, but there are around 53,000 US students doing this.
Wow.
So it's not brand new.
Mm-hmm.
But in the undergrad space, it feels new and scary, I think, for parents. So parents are vital to the role at the undergrad space. Interestingly enough, at least the folks that I've been working with, and I think a lot of these parents have either some type of significant international experience or background or heritage. And so these folks are eager to introduce their kids to this experience at an undergrad level. So I haven't run into as much fear at the parental level that I thought I was going to. But regardless, parents are a vital role in making, working with them to make sure it's the right fit.
Well, I think I told you when we were talking last week was if I were a parent and I had a kid that was getting ready to go into college and I found out how much I could save by having them go abroad, I think a choir of angels would begin to sing because the savings is significant.
Yeah, and I can talk about that a little bit because most people don't even know that this is an option.
Right.
And so I'll talk first about undergrad and then I'll flip to grad.
Okay.
Now, there's obviously a lot of variety in regards to cost abroad, just like there's going to be variety in cost in the United States. But we are based in Colorado, so I'm going to sort of use Colorado as our base point here.
Okay.
But in Colorado, you can expect to pay, unless you're going to a community college, and honestly, community college can be expensive even in comparison to doing things abroad. But you're you're looking at around, depending on where you're going and what types of scholarships you're getting, probably anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000 a year. And that's pretty average. It goes up from there. Like there are folks that are paying $50,000 a year. And it's, for me, I just feel I'm heartbroken by some of this. And I don't want students to, be riddled with debt and having to get buried under this.
It almost has a predatory feel to me. And I guess I use that word a lot, being a ninja, and I look for predators everywhere. But it has almost a predatory feel that, you're stuck. You don't have a choice. You have to pay this much money because if you don't, you're not going to get a good education and you won't have a good life and everything's going to be a mess.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think as I'm a parent too, and I feel like if I take in that story, that narrative of like, oh, we have to stay ahead. We've got to, it's, and I feel trapped. I don't know what to do, but we have to pay this money. Then it's scary, right? And I've talked to families who've taken out a second mortgage on their home to
Wow.
pay for education, and then they risk falling out of the middle class, right? So, and I also know that there are universities that can offer really good scholarship packages.
Mm-hmm.
So the trick though is finding them
Mm-hmm.
in the US and finding them for 4 years. Oftentimes you might get the first year is really attractive, and then it just sort of goes down from there,
Mm-hmm.
what you're offered. So anyhow, all of that to say, I was like, you know what? I'm taking this on the road because I want people to know that there are options. So it can range anywhere from free tuition abroad to, it could be, obviously there's some private universities abroad that are outrageously expensive that I quite frankly wouldn't probably recommend.
Mm-hmm.
But like, for example, one of my favorite universities is in Hungary. And for 3 years, an undergrad in Europe is generally completed in 3 years versus 4, but you have to walk in knowing what your major is. So they don't have that general education year. So you're really walking in like, all right, I'm ready to do this. But it's 3 years, and it's around, each major is slightly different, but on average is going to be around 5,500 a year for 3 years.
Wow.
Right? So that's just super simple math for me. And that it is an awesome education.
Mm-hmm.
It is well regarded in the world.
That's even simple math for me. I can even do that in my head. So what about the cost of living?
Yeah. Well, this particular location it's probably on par with Denver or a little cheaper.
Okay.
There are going to be locations where it's going to be more expensive. So London's an easy example. I usually wouldn't recommend students do programs in London unless they're really, there's a particular reason for that. But so that's just one example. France generally is around, unless you're choosing a private institution, it's around 3,500 a year. But UK is more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
UK is around, and it depends on the major, 16,000 to 18,000 a year.
Which in comparison to what you'd be paying here is still a huge, huge difference.
Still a huge difference.
And what about Germany?
Well, Germany, in my opinion, Germany's, for the most part, with the exception of one state that does charge tuition to U.S. students, it's free tuition for U.S. students.
Uh-huh.
And even the state that does charge tuition to U.S. students, it's $3,000 a year.
Wow.
So it's still, obviously extremely reasonable. But I generally don't recommend Germany for undergrad students. It is a much better fit at the graduate level.
Okay. So I know that there's a lot of parents listening to this right now, and they're probably just chomping at the bit thinking this is way too good to be true. So how are these degrees received when the student comes back to the United States and they do have this either undergraduate or graduate degree from, another country?
Right. I mean, a lot of these programs are, well ranked in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up usually happening is students build up their network around the world and job opportunities open up around the world. Now, I talked to a hiring manager at a big aerospace company in the United States. And he's US, and actually he did his master's degree in the Netherlands. So he already understands the value of it. Mm-hmm. But he said to me that he prefers US students to do a degree abroad, doesn't matter undergrad or grad, because he can automatically put them into positions
Wow.
that require some type of global expertise. He knows that he doesn't have to train them up for it.
Mm-hmm.
He finds, and I have found this as well, students tend to be more resilient and able to problem solve in a global way
Mm-hmm.
when they've had this experience. And so it's very attractive on the job market. Now, obviously, you still have to be a competitive candidate and, demonstrate that you have some competencies.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found, as has he, that you've got students who do this are able to demonstrate a lot of global competency and skill building in relationship to how they're able to problem solve complex issues.
I would imagine the problem solving skills and the critical thinking skills would just explode.
Yeah, and I will say it's not easy, right? There are challenges you are presented with abroad because it's a different system and how things are being communicated to you are different, that it takes a certain level of resiliency and self reflection and courage to be able to step into that space and allow for that learning to occur.
Ooh, courage. I love that. That's just, well, it's one of those words that gives me chills and makes me very happy when I hear about that, because you don't really have a cushion. You really don't have anything to fall back on. You can't just take a bus and hour-long drive to get home to mom and dad if something goes wrong. You have to figure it out for yourself. And of course, you probably have resources available, but it's not quite the same. So you have to grow up pretty quickly.
You have to grow up. Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually one of my questions I ask folks when they come into to work with me is if they are comfortable in a space to solve problems and how resilient they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I give, we walk through a few examples, but not that you have to be, a complete problem-solving ninja at the very beginning of the whole thing.
Well, none of us are at the beginning.
But you have to have a willingness to fail and get up again.
Mm-hmm.
And
in that space of failing, which is where a lot of the learning begins and a lot of the skill sets start to develop, because if we don't fail, how could we grow? Mm-hmm. And we always learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely. And I have found that, and this is why this skill is so critical it's critical regardless, but it's absolutely critical abroad, is that most abroad institutions, the culture of college abroad is they're treating like students as adults. Mm-hmm. And in the United States, we have morphed to treating college as a continuation of childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that.
But at the same time, right, it's making sure students find the right fit for themselves. If they're not comfortable yet in a space to be a cross-cultural ninja and a problem-solving ninja, that's okay. But, maybe maybe they need a gap year, right, before launching into it.
Right.
Or maybe, maybe U.S. education is right for now, or maybe they just take 1 year of community college here in the States just to get acclimated and then launch, right? There are ways to play with it to make sure it's the right fit for the student at the right time.
Well, as far as the ninja skills go, I mean, we all start out as white belts, right? We don't just go right into it and have this black belt. So we all start from the very beginning, little baby steps, one step at a time. And it's a process. And like you said, it's a learning experience and a growing experience. And I would imagine that when the student comes back to the United States, they even see their family situation in a completely different way and a different perspective on life in general.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, assuming the student allows themselves to step into a place of transformation, it is impossible to come back and not notice things in a different way. Mm-hmm.
I think it would be impossible once you've had that experience, because you can't go back.
That's right. I mean, I'll give you just a slight example. This is so tiny, but this just sort of gives you a flavor.
Okay.
Right? So, all right. So there's a student in Netherlands at a university there. So this student is at a choice point. The student's frustrated, feels like the housing's not what they want. They're super angry, and they want they actually just want US customer service, which doesn't exist. It's fully in Netherlands and their public institutions. Okay. So it's a very different expectation. Mm-hmm. And to make matters even more complicated, the Dutch are very direct with their communication. So they sort of tell it how it is, right? They're not like, let me soften it with whatever.
They're not going to sugarcoat it, right?
Yeah, and it's a communication style. So this is a cross-cultural communication issue. Now, if the student has a choice, right? The student can come and just complain and then be mad at the Dutch because they're not being touchy-feely, mm-hmm. right? So that's one option. The other option is to sit back and reflect and say, okay, what's happening here? What can I learn from this situation? How am I communicating? How are my expectations maybe hindering me receiving the information? Mm-hmm. And assuming they can move from complaining, which is a defense, right? Any type of complaint is a defense, in this case, of the reality that they are not seeking. Mm-hmm. So it's a defense, and it's also it's a cross-cultural defense. It's a way to be like, oh, they're doing this wrong.
I hate them all.
Yes.
It's their fault. I hate them all.
Assuming they can move from defense, right, to this complaining defense to reception and reflection, then possibilities develop and their cross-cultural skill set develops. They can then change into a cross-cultural ninja because they're able to receive information and realize that this may not be a big of a deal as they thought. They just have to shift their expectations and listen to a different way of communicating. Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's an amazing skill set to have. It's, something that's just a lifelong skill.
Yeah, and it never ends. That's right. It never ends, right? This being a cross-cultural ninja means that you are always learning.
Right. Well, and that's part of the ninja mindset too, is lifelong learning, because if you're not learning, you're not growing. And what's the point? Mm-hmm. So right. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add to that is that learning isn't always comfortable.
Oh, no. Oftentimes it's really uncomfortable.
Right.
But that's when you get to that other end, you get so much out of it. And there are so many blessings that, come from putting yourself in that position where you are uncomfortable, and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is really where you find those little nuggets of wisdom and life lessons.
That's right.
So one other thing I did want to ask you about, because I know people who are listening might be wondering about this, is what about medical degrees abroad?
I mean, it's becoming more and more popular as U.S. students realize how expensive it is to do this in the United States. It's organized differently in many countries. So usually if let's say you have a student who really knows, like, I want to be a medical doctor or work in a medical profession. Mm-hmm. One thing I suggest is either take a gap year and make sure that that's the right call. The reason for that is because most medical degrees start at undergrad. And so if you do your undergrad here in the United States and then try to do your medical degree, you sort of have to go backwards a little bit.
Okay.
And so it's more efficient to start your medical degree at undergrad, which is where it starts abroad. And it tends to be a 6-year program. Mm-hmm. And they're not, obviously there's some that are more competitive than others. But there's a few that I would, off the top of my head recommend. And then, there's one in New Zealand I really like. There's one in Cyprus I really like. And actually one in Hungary. So there are ways to really do this in an affordable way. And you still have to take your exams in the States. Some of them even have, well, I know one program has even residency in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So that can be attractive as well.
What an incredible option. So if anybody is listening who's thinking about medical school, or a child wants to go to medical school, this is an incredible opportunity. So you really want to connect with Denise. I would highly recommend it. And one other thing that I wanted you to address was something that you said when we were talking before. Do what makes your heart sing.
Yeah. And I think it's true, right? For I think every young person, and honestly, it's me too, right? I'm 49 and I'm still like, what makes my heart sing, right? Am I practicing that every day? So it's true for all of us.
Just let me tell you something. If you're 49, that means you're going to be 50. And 50 is a magic year. I am telling you, my life completely turned around. 50 was absolute magic for me. It was so wonderful, and my 50s were so great. When the big 60 was coming around the corner, I went running to it with my arms outstretched, going, bring it on, baby. It just keeps getting better and better.
I love it, Cheryl. I will connect with you offline on that, because I notice I have some anxiety. So
yeah, we'll talk later.
But I notice that I think sometimes all of us, we sort of get trapped into thinking that I have to do what others expect me to do. And then we stop listening, like going back to that inner voice, we stop listening to the inner voice and noticing where we get our energy from. And walking in that path, even if it makes our parents unhappy. And so I think that's just sort of a lifelong skill to pay attention to where we're deriving our energy from and trying to move in that direction. Even if we're a crab and we're sort of going sideways slowly and we're like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. Right.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, but I encourage everyone to, we're in COVID-19, and I think there's a lot of fear and uncertainty. And the opportunity in that is to stop and to listen, take some deep breaths, and to see, A, what makes our heart sing, but also B, where can we pivot to?
I really like the fact that you said, do what your heart sings and listen to yourself and follow your path, even if it makes your parents unhappy. And I think that that's probably a big learning point right there, because another life lesson, you're not going to please everybody all the time. And there are sometimes you're going to make decisions that are better for you that other people are not going to like. And you have to just say, that's all right. I know this is not going to make you happy, or you're not going to like me, but this is what I have to do for myself to keep myself healthy and strong and live my life path. So,
that's right. That's right.
Well, Denise, how can people get a hold of you? Because I know, like I said, people are probably chomping at the bit going, who is this woman? How can I find her?
The easiest way to find me is through my website, and that's www.affordabledegreesabroad.com.
Okay.
And they can also find me on LinkedIn as well, and it's Denise Cope.
Excellent. And we have all this posted on the episode anyway, but I just wanted you to have the opportunity to say that. And any other pearls of wisdom or last things you want to leave our audience with?
Well, I think my last word would be, I want students and families to realize that there are options, and to not feel trapped by sort of what we're presented with right now. And also, I think, hearkening back to COVID-19, one thing I really notice right now is there are some countries with amazing public health systems in place. So New Zealand and Germany are rocking it right now. And so as a parent or a student, but often I'm really going to talk as a parent right now, but I think realizing that it can actually be safer to do this abroad.
Good point. May I ask how old is your
A son.
A son?
He's 12. And but what's awesome is, you know, he's already planning on his degree abroad. So we talk about this on a regular basis.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Well, Denise, thank you so much for being on the show. You truly are a cross-cultural ninja, and you're a ninja in many other ways as well. And to my audience, thank you so much for listening. And remember to listen to your inner voice and to do what makes your heart sing, because that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.